Hello, nerds! Nerds for humanity. We are back in the nerd zone, and I have an OG nerds for Yang, originals viewer and friend. We go back all the way to 2019, I guess. So that's been a long time. It's 5 years ago. So welcome back to the nerd zone, Erez. How are you, man?
Yeah, good to see you, Tom. It's good to be back.
So just for those who don't know, maybe a little quick intro to yourself and where you're joining from, and then I think we'll talk about some hot topics like the presidential campaign, Israel, and maybe immigration. Just some light topics.
Yeah, we'll solve them definitely in the next 30 minutes. Quick intro. I'm joining from New Jersey. Since we're talking about the topic, I'll mention. So I'm originally from Israel. Actually, just flew back from there 2 days ago, and so some relevance there in terms of where I'm coming from on the topic that we'll discuss. But yeah, I live in New Jersey and got involved in the Yang 2020 campaign, and since then have tried to be as much independently minded as possible, very open to changing my mind, open to seeing value in perspectives on both sides of it, obviously more than two sides on any single topic, but trying to sort of see the nuance, hold two opposing thoughts in my head, and figure out what's the best way forward on each of them.
Well, since you just came back from Israel, I got to ask you, like, what is it like on the ground over there? Like, what's the vibe and what are people talking about?
So I was in Haifa and Tel Aviv, pretty much most of that time, and so those are kind of a bubble in Israel. They're not feeling the brunt of war or impact, not in the north and not in the south, and so it's kind of almost normal there.
Mm-hmm.
In that people are sort of going back to their day-to-day lives, work, school, kids, all this kind of stuff. With that said, it's the war and the hostage situation and the uncertainty about the future, whether there's going to be a bigger war with Hezbollah in the north, what's going to happen in the south, the political sort of situation in Israel. All those things are unknown and they're never far out of mind. And especially as I noticed it, I mean, in Tel Aviv and Haifa, like there's posters of hostages everywhere you go. So you can never go more than kind of 20 steps before seeing a reminder of what's currently at stake, what's happening. And so even though people are going on with their day-to-day lives, it's hard to sort of feel totally free of the situation and knowing that there's still, a heavy toll that's being paid, of course, by the hostages, of course, by many of the soldiers, and everyone knows someone fighting in Gaza or already affected by the war. So it's different than normal. But certainly in the middle of the country, everyone has to sort of get back to life. That's part of why they're there, why everyone's fighting for the normality.
Are there still any like missile attacks from Gaza into Israel, or has that been for the most part kind of suppressed?
I think there were some today. So yes, that still happens. I think the frequency is much less, and usually ones that are not reaching as far. But yes, it's still happening. Definitely within a couple times a week, I imagine.
And what's the general kind of consensus from the Israelis that you spoke to in terms of the way that Israel is kind of prosecuting the response to October 7th and Netanyahu's leadership?
Yeah, complicated question. I'll not to sidestep it, but I'll sort of say something that just because I think it's so relevant to the topics that you talk to, the audience here, something that sat with me. There's so many parallels to what's happening in the U.S. In sort of the political landscape. Israel is not it's not a two-party system. It's a multi-party parliamentary democracy, which is in theory, very different, but at the end of the day, it's still kind of boiled down to two sides. You still have to build a coalition to have a side. And so you have the coalition in power, and then you have the opposition. And those coalitions can sort of change depending on which parties they need to, get together with to create their minority. They're the majority, which is, why BB has sort of aligned with super far right folks and the Haredi, the ultra orthodox, to sort of create his majority. But where it gets really interesting, and something that I observed, I've family on both sides of sort of the aisle, I guess. And what I kind of noticed more than anything, it's not like even my family that's, more on the right, they don't,
Mhm.
they don't love Bibi. They've criticized him for years. They never particularly liked him. They criticize him. Certainly they'll give, some of the responsibility, a lot of the responsibility for October 7th on him, and things like that. But at the end of the day, they're, the worst case, their biggest fears is the far left. And so for them, their choice is between BB or anybody that's not BB is probably moderate, maybe a little bit center left, and they're going to be aligned with the far left. And so for them, it's like, well, we got to stick with BB. We got to stick with sort of this party that's like against this radical extremism on the left, which I think was always in place, but certainly over all of the judicial reforms that were, highly debated and protested and everything else over the last year and a half, became just that much more obvious to them. And I would say it's the same thing on the other side, where it's like I have family that's center left. They certainly don't align to the far left. But BB and his party, anything that they do and say is sort of, they associate with the far right coalition. And so that polarization exists even in this sort of multi-party system, which is just sort of funny how we've all sort of like, you pick the lesser of two evils, and whatever that evil is, even if it's this tiny fraction, but you associate it. I can sort of make the parallel here, and sorry, jumping around topics. But I'm talking to a lot of family and friends there. I have a lot of family and friends here who never liked Trump, personally and everything else. They're sort of generally center left. Since 10/7 and everything that's happened, they're at least considering voting for Trump, if not saying, no, I'm definitely going to vote for him. And the reason why is they see what's happening on the far left here with, people being pro Hamas and sort of taking it to the extremes and the anti-Semitism. And that's associated with the left. And Joe Biden is a Democrat, so he's with the left. He's never endorsed those things or anything else, but they're like, nope, I have to pick the thing that's the thing that scares me the most is the far left. And so Trump will, put an end to that, or Trump will sort of be more forceful against it. And so it's pretty interesting how people are sort of thinking from this fear-based. I just have to pick the thing that's the furthest from the least likely to empower the force that I'm most scared of.
Let's talk a little bit about Senator Schumer's remarks this week. I believe he may be the highest ranking elected official of Jewish heritage in the Senate. I'm pretty sure he is. And he made a speech this week, and it was pretty critical of Netanyahu. And I think one of the things that he said that I kind of agree with, I do agree with, is I feel like Netanyahu's kind of over the top prosecution of the response to 10/7 has kind of reduced general support for Israel internationally. And this is not good for Israel to be kind of like ostracized. And I was like, wow, only Schumer can make that statement because, obviously you don't want to be mistaken as being anti-Semitic or something. But I kind of feel like being against Netanyahu doesn't mean you're against Israel. There are a lot of people that don't like Netanyahu, like you mentioned.
Personally, I don't at all.
Yeah. What is your take on Schumer's statement and of, Netanyahu's like kind of, I mean, we've been, not we, but the IDF has been bombing that little strip of land in Gaza, for like 5 months now, and dropping a lot of ordnance on that little, like the size of Las Vegas. How much more? Like, it just feels like what, like, if you haven't gotten to those tunnels after 5 months, like maybe try some different tactics that are a little more surgical. I mean, what's your read on Schumer and Netanyahu's kind of strategy?
Yeah, so I'll take two separate topics. I didn't see the
Yeah.
Schumer full discussion. I think what I saw was more controversial and not what you just mentioned, which is, I think Biden has said things, I think it's okay to say, hey, this is like, there's a lot of damage happening, right? And question like, is this the best approach? And this is a humanitarian crisis. And I think that's all well and good. And certainly in an election year, and even outside of an election year, I think it's important, right? We nobody wants that. But I don't think Bibi actually wants that. Like, no one wants the pain and suffering. I'll assume Bibi is actually has a, like the Grinch, like there's a little bit of heart in there. But I think what caught me and a lot of other people off guard with Schumer's comments, where he basically called for Israelis to hold elections to take out of power, and that was sort of the listen, don't interfere in other democracies' elections. And so I think, I just saw like John Kirby basically walk that back in some comments, saying like, yeah, we're not trying to interfere in other democracies. So I think criticism is fine and fair, and friends and allies should be able to criticize each other. And there needs to be pressure publicly and privately to sort of make this happen as humanitarianly as possible and things like that. In terms of what's actually happening on the ground, and I didn't try to debate too many of my friends are sort of I think most Israelis are, they hate what's happening there. They hate what's happening to Palestinians, to innocent civilians. But they and I don't see another way to sort of get to a resolution, which the resolution is twofold. One is getting the hostages back, which we're certainly trying to do via negotiations, which, recently it seems like, obviously I'm not on the ground, it seems like Hamas is the one that's sort of not coming to the table to agree to release, especially the most vulnerable hostages. And beyond the hostages, Israel has to ensure, this is the job of any government, is ensure the safety of its people. That can't happen with Hamas, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people agree. If Hamas has still the ability not just to inflict damage, right? The military, the rockets, the tunnels and things like that, to inflict damage on Israel, but if they have the ability to rule over Gaza, until they are basically diminished to a sufficient extent where they can't really launch rockets, they can't really amass power, and then they kind of had like a mob rule over Gaza, right? The Palestinians, the civilians in Gaza, yes, they voted them in nearly 20 years ago, but they're ruled over, with an iron fist. It's not like the people there have a choice to vote them out. If you speak up against them, you get killed. That actually just happened now. There was there's a lot of like clans and families, and one of the big families, I don't know if they were talking to Israel. The assumption, or what I heard, is that Hamas thought that they were talking to the Israelis, and maybe it was like distributing aid or whatever it is. The next day, they killed the head of that family and 10 of his family members. And so for the Palestinian people, for them to have any chance of a future, it can't be with Hamas in power. It can't be with Hamas able to bully, intimidate, and rule Gaza, which I don't think anyone can agree that they've done good for the Palestinian people. With all the money that's come in, it's basically been hand-to-mouth food, but every single other penny has been development of tunnels, weapons, etc. And so I don't see an alternative. As painful as it is, it's trying to minimize as much of the loss of life of civilians. Some of that is unfortunately inevitable given how Hamas has entrenched themselves in those civilian populations, intentionally hoping for civilian deaths because that helps make Israel this pariah on the world stage. But I've yet to hear an alternative about how Israel should conduct itself to get the hostages back and keep its people safe. And, again, Israel's goal is not to make the Palestinian people not live under Hamas's tyranny. But I think everyone kind of wants that too. And I think this is, I don't know any other way that we get there.
So, like in terms of other ways, and I don't know, maybe this has already been offered and rejected by Hamas, but like, why wouldn't the offer be, hey, we're going to pause bombing, and if a certain number of hostages is released on a regular basis, that pause will continue, and if not, then we will resume bombing.
I think that was
And
the most recent offer on the table. Israel didn't really want to sort of start all of these hostilities again or restart them, especially in Rafah during Ramadan. And so there was sort of a perfect opportunity, like it was a win-win-win where Israel could regroup, sort of get the hostages back, not attack during Ramadan when everyone was saying, don't attack during Ramadan, this will be terrible. Israel does care about the optics, but at the end of the day, if the optics aren't going to prevent Israel from doing what it needs to do, if it doesn't have, a partner that's willing to negotiate on hostages or sort of get to any of the other resolutions that Israel needs.
So let's I know it's if you were running for office, you would refuse to answer hypotheticals, but since it's just two nerds talking, like we have to be able to
Not
play
running for
around with
office yet. Maybe one day, but I don't mind. If I run for office, it's going to be under the terms where I can still speak my mind. So
I love it. So like I could take the position that even if Hamas doesn't agree to release the hostages, because right now I think there's like 120 hostages or something around there.
I thought it was
Give or take.
140, but yeah, it could be, yeah.
Okay, so let's call it 140 then. I mean, there's tens of thousands of dead Gazans now, right? Like maybe it's not 30,000 like the Hamas health ministry says, but even if it's half that, that's a lot. Why wouldn't we just say, you know what? As long as you stop lobbing missiles or any hostilities towards Israel, like we will have a ceasefire, then we'll enter some negotiated process for the hostages in exchange for, whatever additional like loosening of restrictions or aid or whatever. But
no, I mean the main thing they'll ask for is for us to release prisoners that we hold.
Okay.
Which Israel would generally do very quickly for any Palestinians that don't have blood on their hands. When you talk about Palestinians that have blood on their hands, that have killed Israelis, soldiers, or civilians, that gets really, really difficult to do. That is really difficult for the government. And it's not just a decision to do, it's the people of Israel. Many of them say, don't do that. Right? They're against that. These are people that we already paid the price. They already took our lives. And so that gets very, very complicated. If you remember Gilad Shalit, who was kidnapped, 2000 and it wasn't 2006, but right around then, right? Israel gave up 1,000. He was held for years in captivity. And Israel gave 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for him, many of whom I think had blood on their hands, including one of the masterminds of 10/7. And so now at this point, especially after that, it's like Israelis are kind of like, no, we have to finish this. We're like, any agreement now that keeps Hamas in power just basically says, all right, so in a couple of years, we're going to see this again, whether it's rockets fired or some other attempt to do another 10/7, which they keep promising to do. So you're absolutely right. Like all of those things should be on the table, but when push comes to shove and you check them all out, they're not really options. And I know on the other side of that equation is another thousands of innocent Palestinians killed, which is it's horrific. None of us want that, but I still haven't seen an alternative that can actually work for keeping Israelis safe moving forward.
Okay, so let's play out the scenario where there's no fair hostage trade deal that can be agreed to by either side. And now we're like, okay, well, we can't get any more hostages out. For me, I still am not able to understand, like, what is the end game for continuous bombing? Like, we may never get to all of the Hamas leadership. Like, they seem pretty dug in. Like, how many would, like, if the military experts said, hey, look, we can diminish Hamas further with another couple months of bombing, but we'll lose another like 5,000 civilians on the Gaza side. Like, is that a worthy trade? Like, that seems like a lot of collateral damage.
Yeah, so I mean, just to confirm, just because for folks listening, I want to. Israel is not doing indiscriminate bombing, right? It's very targeted. These are very precise munitions, very precise approaches. But Hamas lives within civilian, not just like in civilian populations. They're in the same house as civilians. These civilians are housing them. They know they're living there in the same rooms, in the same building, and so. This isn't sort of some random carpet bombing thing, which some people would like folks to believe. I think I can't speak to this. So Rafah is sort of the last stronghold now of Hamas. They've a lot of reasons. Do you hear me?
Hey, Erez, I lost you.
Yeah.
When you said, "Hey, look, these are not indiscriminate bombs. These are very surgical."
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Oh no, are you?
So is this me or you? Let's. You tell me when you can hear me, Tom.
Give me 1 second.
Oh, I hear you now. And now you're gone. All right, great. Thank you. I'm just seeing the chat now, so you can hear me. Yeah, it's Tom. Of course, it's Tom. Hey, nerds. I'll just be the host, I guess. Let's see how I'll do my best Tom impression. I won't continue the conversation until he gets back. I'll have to catch him up. All right. Yeah, I'm happy to keep chatting. So Tom can catch up on the recording. But what I was saying is, so Israel is not doing indiscriminate bombing. This is very targeted, but Hamas is living within the civilian populations and really within the exact living quarters of civilians. So there's no real way for Israel to get to Hamas without that collateral damage. There you are.
Hey,
Tom.
I'm back. I'm gonna strangle my 14-year-old, who I'm pretty sure is Fortniting right now on the Xbox and sucking up all our bandwidth. So I'm on my mobile hotspot. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. I think we're all good.
All right.
So
So
I was
luckily
just
were
picking
you
up.
able
Yeah.
to finish your answer?
Yeah. No, not all the way. So I was talked about how Israel's not doing the indiscriminate bombing, and then in terms of the strategy, so most of Gaza, a lot of them have been pushed down to the south. The last remaining stronghold of Hamas is in the city of Rafah, and that's where there's apparently 4 battalions of Hamas that are based in Rafah that are all still there. I've heard that there's 2 other battalions that have sort of like piecemeal from that escaped from other parts. So that's the last stronghold. That's the last bastion that they have. And I think Israel kind of feels the need, and I don't disagree, that they need to go in and finish the job. They need to get rid of Hamas. One of the reasons, besides the numbers that they have, besides all of the people and the weapons and everything else that they have stored, I think it's also the matter of tunnels, because those tunnels, I'm sure there's tunnels that go from Rafah all the way to Egypt. So in terms of smuggling tunnels, in terms of their ability to resupply and rearm as soon as Israel leaves or pulls back and sort of is not daily inside that world, that's just saying, yeah, okay, so in another few years we're going to deal with this kind of stuff again. And so I think there's sort of a twofold thing, which is, yes, taking out as many of the numbers, certainly the leaders. There's a lot of symbolism in taking out the top leaders that were responsible for 10-7. Certainly the numbers, number of fighters that they have, the weapons that they have stored there, and the tunnels, which is their ability to rearm, as well as to their insurgency, right? There's going to be a long-term insurgency, whoever steps in, whether it's Saudi Arabia or some other Arab conglomerate that steps in to sort of run the day-to-day administration of Gaza moving forward. If that's what ends up happening, there's likely to be an insurgency within, because there's going to be a lot of Hamas left. And anything that we can do to remove their ability to conduct that with their tunnels and sort of all of their underground infrastructure is going to go a long way to ensuring that whatever that next day and the vision for next day that gets to a thriving Gaza and thriving Palestine can actually be achieved.
Okay, last question on the Israel-Gaza thing, and then we have some lighter topics around the migrant crisis in Chicago and banning TikTok in America.
I like that. I like that one.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll talk about it for sure. Do you worry that the way all of these civilian casualties are piling up, like, isn't that risking creating like a whole nother generation of kids who really have a lot of anger towards Israel?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fear. It's a concern. I wish there was I've racked my brain. Like, I'm from Israel. I think I'm there's no way I can say I don't have bias. Everyone has bias about everything. Like, I really try to be as unbiased as possible. See both sides. I've had sympathy for the Palestinians for forever, for as long as I've been sort of an adult and thinking and realizing what's happening on the other side. As much as I'm proud to be Israeli, I've been ashamed to be Israeli for a long time, because I've seen things that the government has done that has made life for Palestinians harder and harder. And some of that I understand why. There are security reasons. You can rationalize all of them. I didn't think they were all the right thing. I think there were, I could take both sides. I really struggle with this. And so when 10-7 happened, something flipped for me, and it flipped for all Israelis, and it flipped for a lot of people in the world, and many of them afterwards. I used to think we could all get along, and I sort of was like, okay, well, let's find a way. And 10-7 made me realize when I saw, them going back, when I saw, Hamas coming back and bringing hostages, and the people in the street there celebrating. That's something that we've seen in the past, right? All over the world, different places. And the people they're celebrating, when they celebrated on 10-7, it hurt so much. And I realized I actually don't wish any of them death. Like, I don't wish them harm. but it felt like, well, now it's us or them. We can't both live. And it's not like, oh, I want them all to die, but now to get these hostages back and to ensure Israel stays safe, some of them are going to have to die. Like there's just no choice because Hamas has to be taken out. And the stuff that we've dealt with every couple of years when they start, firing rockets at us, we go back, try to attack them. Of course, there's a lot of collateral damage with civilians dying, and then Israel is the bad guy. And so it seemed like, well, we can't play this game anymore. This is the job we have to do. And those people are celebrating death. I don't want them to die. I don't think they deserve it. This is still like a moral case. But if I have to choose between our people that, for the most part, not all, there's plenty of people on the Israeli side that I criticize, whether on the far right or whatever it is, that I think would say some terrible things and actually wish death upon others. But for the most part, we just kind of want to live in peace and we love life. And there's a lot of people that daily wish death upon Israelis and Jews and Americans and Westerners and everything else. And I'm like, if there's no choice and I don't see another choice, then the job needs to be done to make sure they're not actually a threat to us anymore. And that doesn't mean kill all of them, but it means eliminate their ability to cause harm to Israelis and again, the world. I think this is so much bigger. If Israel falls, collapses, is weakened, I think it's only a matter of time before it sort of spreads. And I think a lot of people agree. Like, I think Saudi Arabia is very much supporting Israel because they know what will happen. They know the instability that will happen, not just in the region, but in the world if Israel is weakened. And so I think there's a lot of geopolitics here, but ultimately Israel needs to be able to secure itself, its people, its land. And that's unfortunately, I put 90+% of the responsibility of what's happening to Palestinian people on Hamas. They're the ones that led to this, and they're the ones that could end it today. If they give up the hostages and they give up, it's all over. So.
Okay. Hard topic. I think we both want peace and prosperity for all humans, including Israel and the people in Gaza and the Palestinians. We'll just hope that happens soon. And let's move on to another topic, which is I think they're in Chicago. They're talking about basically not having enough capacity for more migrant populations kind of settling there. There's issues around ER visits, school capacity, like measles epidemics, all kinds of challenges. On the one hand, you and I have family that, came from other places and now we're in America. We celebrate, the opportunities that we've had here. On the other hand, there is like a number on how many people a finite amount of resources can support in a period of time. What's your take on this whole immigration thing? Because it feels like there's two extremes. There's like the Trump position, which is like, whatever, anybody that's brown or not from Norway is not welcome here. And then there's the, hey, anyone who wants to come should be able to come at any time. What's your read as you observe this?
I mean, this is such a frustrating topic because it's one of those where the both parties generally, historically, at least until recently, like neither one had an incentive to solve it, right? The issues were easier to keep open and they could campaign on them and things like that. And case in point, the Democrats tried to pass a border bill and gave the Republicans a lot of what they asked for.
Yeah, they did. Mm-hmm.
And Trump said, don't sign it, right? Like, this is going to be like, they need to campaign on this. This is Joe Biden's weakest point. It's the thing that a lot of people are going to not vote based off of, but judge sort of Biden's effectiveness and his ability to protect them from a threat that will be sort of deemed a threat. And it is. It's economic threat. There's probably other sort of cultural and such. So it's sort of unfortunate. It's affecting all of us. There's a common sense, moderate idea. I think the Democrats, sort of far left everyone should be let in is crazy. We can't have that. And even if we do want to let everyone in, there should be a process. There should be a process. It's just legal immigration. Let's make it easier for people to come in, whether they're, economic anxiety, whether they're escaping persecution or anything else, or they're just looking for, to build and grow. They love the American dream, like, the many immigrants that us and many folks that we know. So this is just frustrating because there's like no incentives here for anyone to solve it, even though it's a pretty common sense on how we could approach it. Obviously, we have to figure out the details, but those are details, and no one really wants to solve it.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting challenge to, maybe it's like a second order effect, but I do think if there is unlimited surge in undocumented immigration, unregulated immigration that's abusing the asylum kind of loophole. Number one, it's not clear that people will have a better life because they legally won't be allowed to work. So then they'll have to live in a state that is not consistent with the law. And number two, I actually think for the long-term interest of us being a diverse country of immigrants, there is a point where you could get a backlash against immigrants, all immigrants, legal, illegal, native born, whatever, like
We already see it.
Yeah.
We already
Right?
see it. It might get a whole lot worse.
Yeah. So that's I think if you want to be pro-immigration, I think there's an argument for being pro-regulated kind of managed immigration for the long run, because you could just see the attention is bubbling, and a lot of folks have mindset of scarcity. It's going to be pretty easy to point to the folks from the tribes that don't look like you or don't talk like you.
Yeah, I mean, back to my earlier point, I feel like, there's a far left, very unrealistic, whether they actually have some ideology of, yes, we should let everyone in and we want to be as diverse as possible. And there's no such thing as race and nationality and open borders and all this kind of stuff. And then there's also the folks that are just like, no, the Republicans are against immigration, against letting people in. And so we have to be for it. So both of those angles, both of those are terrible to me, ways to think about this. I could actually deal with the first one. That's actually an ideology that really truly believes this, even though, it's completely unrealistic.
Okay, last topic, and then I think we'll wrap up. It's always fun catching up, Erez. And just so people know, like sometimes when Erez and I catch up, it's just over like a Google Meet or something, and we're like, wow, this would have been a great Nerds for Humanity conversation. So
it's all new topics every time, and then we talk 6 weeks later, and it's a whole new set of
I know there's always something. Let's talk about
TikTok. Is TikTok? Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, in fact, there's like a new spin, which is, I think Steve Mnuchin and some other billionaires are thinking of acquiring it. And what was interesting was I was like, I definitely don't love the idea of the CCP having an arm's length access to this data. But I'm also not entirely comfortable with like a bunch of former Trump cabinet members controlling the largest media platform out there either.
So two views. Actually, I mean, the data part is important. I'm not like that much of a privacy person myself, and I don't. Yes, it can be used, it can be abused, and really targeted for specific people. I actually am more worried about the CCP controlling the algorithm. I'm really worried about their ability to influence what so many people, especially young, impressionable people, are seeing. And they could just put the little bit of thumb on the scale and say, oh, Bin Laden was a great guy. And then all of a sudden, that's what kids are parroting. And that's what really concerns me. So I've been pro not banning TikTok. I actually don't want to ban them. I love the competition in the market. I don't use TikTok. I think it's a terrible thing, but I don't want to sort of eliminate them because I think there's a free speech. I wanted all these people to bring their voices. I just don't want the CCP to control the algorithm. And so the forced sale is where I think it would end up going. I'm all for it. I'm not as concerned about it going to a ideological, like let's say it became the Fox News of the sort of
Right, like the
social
Murdoch
video.
family bought it or something.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, it would become a bubble. One, like a lot of people would leave because they would be against it because they'd see it as some sort of partisan kind of tool and voice. And so I think a lot of folks would leave, and there would be competition. There would be a new platform, whether it would go to whatever Meta's offering is,
Hmm.
or YouTube Shorts, and they would lose money. And so I don't think Steve Mnuchin or whoever it is, they'd be unrealistic if they're like, we're going to spend $100 million and we're going to or 100 billion and continue to see this thing grow. If they make it a partisan thing, it's likely, yes, it'll be solid. Fox News obviously is doing very well, but Michael Jordan, famously, like, Republicans buy shoes too, and so he chose not to get involved in politics. And I think TikTok, being a nonpartisan platform, is much more profitable. And so I'm not as concerned. But again, freedom of speech, like, they can do it, and there will be competition and other voices will come. I'm just more worried about a foreign adversary having control and being able to influence what we see and ultimately think in this country.
Yeah, I wonder if this opens up a whole new category of regulation around what types of things are foreign domiciled companies allowed to own. It seems very un-American to say like,
But
oh,
somebody said that, like, would we allow Russia to buy a local news channel here?
mm-hmm,
I feel like the answer is no. I don't know if there's laws, or it would just raise up all the flags.
hmm.
And maybe through some back channel, right? There's like a million shell companies and they can influence, but generally speaking, we wouldn't be cool with that. And so how is this any different, except that it's a gigantic scale, and highly influential. So
Yeah, would
I,
we
yeah,
let
but
a
it could.
Russian
Yeah.
would we let a Russian company buy any kind of cable channel? Probably, right? We would.
I don't. A Russian, yes, but the Russian, sort of like the government of Russia, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess even if it were a Russian shell company with ties to the Russian government, I would imagine if they want to buy like ESPN or some shit like that, or like the Saudis when they bought like golf, like, it's weird, but it's a free market. If they pay what the seller wants, I generally feel like the government shouldn't get involved. So I guess what you're saying is, all right, well, for certain types of things, foreign ownership is okay. What's the criteria then? When does it become?
So I think a big part for me is the fact that the way that you had to operate business in China, you basically have to, like, if they say give us data, you have to give them data.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think there's not really, and you don't have to reveal it. Like, at least here, of course, if the government comes and says, hey, this is, like, we need this information, you give it, but you're also able to say that the government asked you for this information. And in China, this would happen, without anybody knowing. And so I think that's where just the ability for them to influence and exert control, the government, on a company that in theory is independent but isn't really, or isn't able to truly be independent. I think that's at the core. So if it's like sort of this is where is it a foreign adversary, and is that foreign adversary, is it a private company that can really do just what's in their interest of their business? Because China doesn't have to make money. Like, China, or sorry, the TikTok, they can have other incentives to show people different content that's not just making the most amount of money.
Hmm.
I prefer my social media companies, as much as I don't like, Meta and all those things, and some of the harms that they cause. I like that they're just chasing money. Like, it's like very pure, and we can, like, sort of forgive them in some ways because they were just trying to make money, as opposed to try to influence, or really to divide our country more than even influencing us one way or the other, but just to sow division.
Yeah. So for the, I think in both cases, the data and the algorithm, you could imagine um, regulatory requirements that are independent of ownership. Like you could say, hey, we don't really care who owns the company, but the way you operate and what you do with this data and how you determine what content is promoted or not needs to follow these guidelines. And if you violate them, you'll lose your right to operate in this country, and you'll pay like 7% of your annual revenue or something. The old European method. Which, as you know, is very motivating for companies to follow if you
I think
kind of
that,
lay this
I think
out.
that would be, if I, I know nothing about it, but I assume the algorithm is very sort of black boxy and complicated. But if you could somehow find a way where like that data is onshored here and there's some sort of ombudsman, like a privacy and data transfer and algorithm person that's actually from the government that sits here and make sure that they're not, the Chinese government is not doing X, Y, or Z, and they sit like inside the company. Sure, if that's possible, that
Mhm.
solves my concerns. I don't care that it's owned by Chinese company. I care that the CCP can control that algorithm without us knowing about it.
Yeah. Like I think you're right on the algorithm is a bigger threat than the data. Um I
There
guess
are
I
threats with the data.
share
I don't know if you saw, like, I think there was a Chinese company that tried to buy Grinder years ago, and that was
oh, I
blocked. That was
oh.
blocked. And so it was like, wow, that's really sensitive data, including from people who, don't reveal that they have Grinder. And the
Mm.
US, whether there's politicians that were personally concerned about
Oh.
that data, or they're just like, hey, some other people that would essentially become under the thumb, right? They could be blackmailed with that information, or the Chinese government or whatever else could reveal it when it's convenient for them.
Yeah, I hear you. I also think that even inside of the country, like if the Koch brothers bought TikTok, like I would not feel great about that.
I wouldn't
I
be
guess
happy
yeah.
about it, but like I don't people would just not use it. People would
Do you think
leave
so?
it,
I don't
not
know,
you.
man.
I think a competitor
Like
would come in and be like, "Hey, that's controlled by the far right. Here's the left version. It would be the MSNBC version of TikTok." There's a lot of leftists on TikTok. I don't think they would really stay
hmm.
on. Some
Then why are they
competitor.
okay with
Let's
it now? I mean, with its current
because they don't
ownership.
think uh, for a lot of if someone this is where uh, when Trump tried to get rid of TikTok in the first place, people on the left were like, "Oh, it's because he's racist." Right? It's sort of anytime
Mm.
Trump did something, it had to be bad, and you had to come up with a reason. And so you take the opposite. You have to take the counter. No, TikTok is great. We should save it. And he's only trying to ban it because he's racist.
Mm.
So I think there's just sort of a knee-jerk reaction that's going to be the opposite. That's probably a factor. I don't think people really care who if it's owned by China or owned by a Chinese company. They don't see that. They don't feel that. No one actually cares about their data and privacy that much for the most part until it's violated and actually hurts them. So I don't think that's a factor for most people on TikTok.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a tough one. I have some libertarian tendencies, and I'm very like uncomfortable with the government telling private corporations what to do, especially because I'm not entirely sure if the legislators are really being thoughtful and nuanced about how they're taking actions. Like, as an example, if you're concerned about social media, like TikTok is not the only platform that you should be looking at, right? Like, there's others out there. Why is there so much attention to this one
I
versus
actually
any of the
read
others?
something recently that this is like the beginning of the government starting to care about a lot of data privacy and social media. And so this is like
Hmm.
part of the puzzle. And I don't know if they care about social media yet. They certainly care about data. They care about some of these companies being too big and too powerful and having sort of undue influence that's unchecked. But I think for TikTok, it is really specifically about China's. They don't want to get rid of it. They like the competition. They're not trying to ban TikTok. They're really trying to force the sale. That's the whole point, is say like, you have to sell it, otherwise we ban it. And that's the threat that they have. So I think it might be part of a bigger play. There's other things that we're seeing now with different like data brokers and stuff getting prosecuted, getting fined. And so that's some theories that I'm seeing, that this is sort of we are going to see more, whether it's a federal privacy law or something else, but we're sort of moving in that direction. So I'm with you. Like a few years ago, I wasn't sure about the TikTok ban. I also have sort of more of the free market view. Really, since October 7th, like I will admit, just what I have seen in terms of the youth, like when people were praising on TikTok, youth were praising bin Laden. They're like, oh, I read the bin Laden manifesto, and oh my God, he was actually right about a whole lot of stuff. And it was just sort of like mind blown. And I don't think it's all from TikTok. It's actually probably a lot of, DEI education, things that we're seeing in schools and universities and everything else. But TikTok is certainly exacerbating that. And the fact that the Chinese government, if they're like, oh, this seems like it's going to cause more division in the US, and they could, I'm not saying they have, but it'd be very, very easy for them to do. And that could be very destructive for us. And so even without trying, it seems to be causing a lot of division. If they wanted to, why wouldn't they? Seems like if I was them, like, and the US is my adversary, and I'm trying to cause more sort of polarization and division, and it's an easy enough thing for them to do. So I don't like doing it, but I don't really see a choice here. And again, let's just force the sale. It'll hurt competition a little bit, but in terms of other companies being worried about coming into the US market and more innovation and things like that. But this is a fairly unique one. And yeah, we have to be worried, about the unintended consequences and be ready to push back if we see that this rule gets abused moving forward, and have to call it out and say like, no, that wasn't the intention of this. And it can't be used, especially in sort of a partisan way, to block things that one party doesn't feel is good for them.
Okay, last topic on this TikTok thing. This is probably a little inside baseball, but I think giving any companies 6 months to find a buyer is crazy. Like,
it won't happen.
Like you can't even get OKRs approved in 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to something earlier, and it was like 6 months from now would be October, and this is before the election, and so Biden is not he's gonna delay this, and so whether they change the timeline to after the election or they delay on signing it, I don't know what that looks like. But yeah, I think 6 months is very unrealistic, and this is why, like, of course, Steve Mnuchin, like, good opportunity. There's going to be a fire sale of some sort. There'll be some bidding, but it could be available for a pretty good price, especially if they only have 6 months. So I do hope that they actually give them more time. I would like this to be a really competitive bid. I'd like to see, it was really interesting. Walmart bid for it last time. That seemed like it was the most likely owner. And Walmart's doing really cool thing in the ad space. I'm like, great. I want another sort of bulwark against the big, duopoly, triopoly, whatever that is that we have in big tech. And so I think that would be a cool thing. But if it's some conglomerate, hopefully it's without partisan interest. But that, again, that's why I prefer it would be like a Walmart or some other company like that wants to really just focus on advertising.
Erez, it's always a pleasure having you in the Nerd Zone. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up? It's been great.
Just because you asked it, I didn't think about it before, but one thing that's really important to me that I think was breaking in our society. Everyone is seeing things in this sort of left-right divide. There's a lot of people in the middle that are generally quiet. They're scared to speak up. They see crazy things happening on the left and right, but it's a punishing environment, right? If you speak up against either side, especially on the left, you get canceled. And so I've been trying to sort of help people find a voice, try to say like, hey, it's okay to sort of say things and not be sure. And we should stand up for people and let them speak their mind. Like free speech is a really important bastion of this country. And one of the framings that I think about too is it's not really left right. There's sort of this like anti-American, anti-Western stance. There's people who really seem quite destructive, really trying to tear things down. And then there's everyone who like loves this country, loves the West. We don't think it's perfect, but we love the values and the rule of law and freedom of speech and all these kinds of things. And those are important to us. And there's other people that are saying those are, this country is irreparable. And so, that's why I wear my American flag pin basically everywhere I go, because I think the vast majority of this country is sort of people who love it or respect it, kind of want to see us build on top, repair it, do better, not tear it down. And so if people look at sort of when you see people talking on Twitter or anywhere else, you're kind of like, are you trying to tear things down or are you trying to, build things up? And that's a better framing, because as long as you're trying to build things up, I don't care who you're voting for, left, right, like we're kind of on the same team. If you're trying to tear things down, then I think you're sort of doing more damage, and that's who I want to be opposed to. And I'm glad. I think that they're the minority, but they're vocal, and so that's what I'm focused on right now.
I forgot to ask you, who are you supporting for president?
I mean, I don't think I could ever vote for Donald Trump. He is, for one reason more than any other, and as I talk to my family in Israel or here, and he's unpredictable I assume that he's always going to do the thing in his personal best interest. TikTok ban is a perfect example. A few years ago, he was dead set on banning TikTok, and now he's saying, no, we shouldn't ban TikTok. Is it because he doesn't want to strengthen Facebook, or is it because these rumors I hear that one of his big donors is a huge investor in TikTok? And so whatever it is, he's only cares about his personal interest and whatever that feeling of the day is. So it's not like I can trust him, even if he says the most beautiful things about, really important. Okay, he'll actually close the border. I believe he could. He actually has the ability, maybe more than Joe Biden, in fighting and everything else, like he'll be able to get through. Not that I'm optimistic, but even if he could, I don't know if that's what he's going to be focused on. And so I guess Joe Biden. I don't really see another choice. So still hoping that there's some sort of contested, maybe we'll get something miraculous come through. But I think Biden's done a very good job, all things considered, and I certainly have a lot more faith in him than in Donald Trump.
He definitely had a pretty good State of the Union night. And the Republicans had a terrible one. I mean, did you see the rebuttal? Like, what the hell was that?
They're a joke, but like they're still somehow it's super competitive. So
to be continued,
anyway.
Erez.
Yeah, great chatting, Tom.
Hey, I really appreciate it, and I will I'll give my youngest son a harsh talking to about consuming all our Wi-Fi during a Nerds for Humanity live stream.
That's the number one rule in the household. Come on.
Yeah, I should be like, hey, when I'm streaming, there's no Fortnite.
You need a red light. You need the on-air thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna get one. I'll see you later, Erez.
Bye,
Peace.
Tom. Bye, everyone.
All right. So, Erez, always a pleasure having that dude on the show. I'm going to give you some closing thoughts. But you know what's going to come before the closing thoughts? I need to thank our channel members. And let's do that. We'll thank our channel members. I'm going to give you some of my closing thoughts about Israel, about immigration, and about Trump versus Biden. I have a feeling I'm going to get in trouble for all three of them. So stay tuned if you want, if you want to watch me get in trouble. Okay, let's see. But before we do that, let us thank our biggest supporter, which is Soldier One. And if you want to become a channel member and help keep this content going. In fact, I was going to invest in a potential upgrade to the camera, but the camera's not terrible. And thank you, channel members, for helping me acquire this new microphone. Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Tom Leung. So cool microphone. Maybe I will invest in a red light Wi-Fi thing that I can put outside, and it would inform the family that I'm streaming. Number one, please avoid screaming outside my door. I don't know if I can get them to not play Fortnite though. That might cause some strife in the Nerds for Humanity household. But at any rate, it's on the wish list. Thank you, Soldier One, for helping me keep this channel going. Soldier One's been a supporter for 46 months, almost the 4-year mark. And then the vice president level, we have Kristen Slevin and Bike. Kristen's at the 50-month mark, and Bike is at the 40-month mark. So thank you to both Kristen and Bike, our VPs. Now, Hardcore, Gene, David, DK, Jackalego, Mr. History, Mona, Vaughn, Yang, Dean, Galessa, J. Perrin, Dana, Jason, Daniel, Mickey, Yoda, Jackson, Unkiyu, and Bobby. Ricky Bobby. And then our verified nerds, only $1.99 a month. I will scroll through these guys so you can see them all. And if you're a verified nerd, you can see your name on the screen right now. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Appreciate it. And if you are not able to join right now, the next best thing you can do is like and share the stream. Now, time for Tom to get in trouble. I'm going to take positions on 3 issues that if I were running for office, I would probably have to be much more delicate about. On the immigration thing, we have to control the abuse of asylum rules. We have to have much faster asylum application processing, not 4 years. It should be like 4 weeks. We should encourage more applications for asylum from the country that you are seeking to escape. And we should actually have more legal immigration for companies that are looking to fill important roles, be they super high skilled roles like, machine learning engineers or AI engineers, all the way down to extremely menial tasks that we just don't have enough people to do. Like, good luck trying to find a roofer in some parts of the country. So that's my take on immigration. Like, I do not feel like it is fair to ask a few cities or areas to bear the burden of additional public school resources, emergency room healthcare, housing, and for the federal government, like, not to get control over the border. You can be more open about immigration legally, and maybe you even have more asylum kind of quota, but you should manage it in a way where you have control. I don't feel like we have control. Number 2, Israel. Can't do it. Cannot continue supporting bombing of Gaza. I realize there are 150 hostages. I don't think that means you can kill 30,000 people. I realize Hamas is a terrorist organization, and if you want to go after Hamas directly and send your troops in and go after them in the tunnels, fine. But I'm not really thrilled with the idea of just dropping 2,000 pound bombs like above the tunnels and saying like, well, whatever happens, it's Hamas's fault. Like, I think that's just an area that I just disagree with. And I know there are well-meaning, well-intentioned, honorable people who disagree with me, like Erez, and we can still be friends. But for me, there's two levels. Like, should Israel be able to bomb the daylights out of Gaza? Question one. Question two is, should the United States fund that activity? And maybe I could be convinced, like, hey, Israel's got to do what it believes it has to do. But then, does the U.S. taxpayer need to subsidize that? And then third, Trump versus Biden. Definitely not for Trump. No. I don't trust him. I mean, the man was literally found to try and overturn an election and then have the audacity to say that it was the Democrats who were trying to steal the election when it was him. And it's the ultimate kind of projection, right? Biden, does that mean we have to go with Biden? I don't know. Maybe. If he had a crappy State of the Union, then we would have had a better chance to have a contested convention. But he did have a good State of the Union, and he earned that. And then, to make his night even better, the Republicans totally pooped the bed and had a terrible State of the Union. So Biden's hand is pretty strong relative to a few months ago. For me, it's a question of, like, what's worse? Risking a Trump win, or finally breaking the two-party duopoly? That's a tough one, because I don't like the two-party duopoly at all, but I definitely don't trust Trump. So who knows? Luckily, I live in California, so I might be able to make a statement without risking helping Trump. But I'm gonna keep watching Biden. Who knows? Maybe he'll win me over, and I'll be an enthusiastic supporter of his. Oh, Amy says agree with all this. All right. Well, so I haven't gotten in trouble with Amy. But yeah, I know I probably offended a bunch of people with any of those three positions. So, but this channel is all about having nerdy conversations about policy and politics, and what a year this is going to be. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget to like and share and help the channel grow and help people discover the conversation I had with Erez. And we'll see you next time. Bye, nerds.